You wake before sunrise in a room that is mostly darkness, wool, breath, and the unmistakable smell of people sleeping too close together. Somebody's foot is in your side. A baby has been making small offended goat noises for half the night, and the air tastes like last evening's smoke never actually left. This is Nazareth, and the great missing stretch of Jesus' life is not a glittering secret. It is not a desert training montage, or a hidden palace education, or 18 years of mysterious cave wisdom. It is 18 years of packed dirt, rough timber, family noise, sore muscles, and the kind of ordinary routine that can sand a person down or make him strong. So how does the most important man in the whole story vanish from the spotlight, only to spend almost 2 decades doing chores, sweating through work, and living in a village where privacy is basically a rumor? Tonight, that question gets answered. And the answer is far more ordinary, physical and human than most people expect. Hey guys, tonight we begin with the lost years of Jesus. We are stepping into the long, quiet stretch after the temple scene, when the astonishing boy grows into a village laborer with dust on his feet and sawdust in his hair. So before you get comfortable, take a moment, like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations, you've just woken up in Nazareth, a little hill village in Galilee, sometime after that temple visit everybody remembers. The good news is, you are in the home of a loving family. The bad news is, loving family means everybody is approximately 6 inches from your face. You open your eyes to darkness and rough beams overhead, or maybe not beams. Maybe just shadow and smoke stains, because the room is still dim and your brain is not yet participating. Someone nearby shifts under a blanket that smells like lanolin, old sweat, and one regrettable spill from who knows when. Your bed is not a bed in the modern, spring-loaded, cloud-like sense. It is more of a negotiated sleeping arrangement. A mat, some padding if you are lucky, woven fabric if somebody in the house has done heroic work, and a blanket with the texture of a mildly hostile sheep. You lie still for a moment, listening. A rooster is losing its mind outside. A goat is already awake, and making that nasal complaint sound as if the entire village has personally wronged it. Somewhere in the house, someone coughs the kind of cough that says smoke has been part of dinner, breakfast, and interior decorating for years. This is where the lost years begin to feel less like a mystery and more like a group project with no quiet room. The famous child from Jerusalem is home now. The boy who amazed elders is back in Nazareth, where amazement is nice, but wood still needs cutting and water still needs carrying. Genius or not, morning has arrived with all the tenderness of a slapped sandal. You sit up and immediately regret it because the air is cold. Not elegant mountain air cold, just mean, damp stonehouse cold that goes straight for your joints and makes your neck feel twice your age. You reach for your clothes. The tunic is rough against your skin, still carrying yesterday's dust in the fibers. You pull it on anyway, because nobody in Nazareth is standing around waiting for linen luxury. Your belt goes around your waist. Your feet find sandals that have seen enough miles to file a complaint. Then you stand and step onto the floor, packed dirt, cool underfoot, gritty, possibly damp in one spot and suspiciously crusty in another. You do not investigate. Ancient life is often a game of choosing not to ask follow-up questions. Around you, the household is stirring. This is not one of those cinematic mornings where a single shaft of golden light lands softly on one holy face. This is a cramped family morning. Fabric rustles. Someone mutters. A younger sibling is half asleep and fully uncooperative. Another child is looking for something that was definitely left somewhere obvious and is now somehow gone forever. You duck past stored jars and baskets. You smell grain, wool, old ash, and people. Bread dough from yesterday lingers in the air with damp earth and animal musk drifting in from outside. It is not a terrible smell exactly. It is just very committed. You push through the doorway and step into the early light. Nazareth is small enough that you could almost throw a stone from one end of your business to the other. Except, please do not, because then it becomes everybody's business. Houses of rough stone cling to the hillside. Paths wind between them in narrow tracks of dust, mud, droppings, and the occasional mystery sludge that has no label and does not need one. The village wakes in layers. First smoke, then voices, then animals deciding to hold public opinions. A woman is already grinding grain with the steady scrape of stone on stone. Somebody farther off is calling to a child. Somebody else is calling to a goat, which ignores him because goats were born believing they pay taxes to no man. You breathe in and get the whole Nazareth bouquet at once. Bread, dung fuel, wet wood shavings, sweat, olive oil, damp stone, and animals. It smells like life packed tightly together with no ventilation plan. This is the hidden life. Not hidden because it is glamorous. Hidden because it looks like every other morning. You are not climbing a mountain to gather secret wisdom. You are heading into years of repetition, family meals, synagogue prayers, repair work, blisters reopening in familiar places, shoulders tightening under weight, the same faces, the same paths, the same chores waiting for you with the patience of tax collectors. And inside this village, everybody knows everybody. If you are late, people know. If your family is short on something, people know. If you carry timber through town and stumble in the dust, congratulations. That memory now belongs to the community archive. A place this small has no need for entertainment. It has each other. The morning chill starts to lift as the sky pales. You can already tell what the day will become. Heat later. Sweat certainly. Dust absolutely. Sawdust if work starts early. There will be rough wood in your hands, the sting of a splinter, the drag of repetitive labor that does not care whether you had a profound childhood moment in the temple. That is the jolt of it. The child who spoke with startling wisdom does not leap from age 12 to public ministry like a neat little page turn. He grows, slowly, in a village, with neighbors, relatives, obligations, and the daily comedy of shared human existence pressing in from every side. You walk into the morning with everybody else. No crowd gathers. No one claps. No dramatic music follows you down the path. Just sandals on dirt, smoke in the air, and the long, unrecorded stretch of life opening ahead like a road that looks exactly like yesterday. First, you have to understand the village that keeps him company all those silent years. Nazareth is not impressive. That is the first thing. It does not rise out of the earth with marble columns and heroic staircases. It sort of clings to a hillside like it got there by accident, and then stayed because moving sounded exhausting. Stone houses huddled together in a way that suggests either community or a complete collapse of personal boundaries. Probably both. You come up the path and dust immediately starts negotiating with your sandals. The lanes are narrow, uneven, and full of surprises, which is a polite way of saying you keep almost stepping in things. Chickens are pecking at scraps. A goat is chewing something that definitely does not belong to the goat. Somewhere nearby, dung fuel smoulders with that thick, sour smell of burnt manure, old ash, and disappointment. This is home. Not a famous home. Not a glamorous one. No visitor arrives, looks around and says, "Ah yes, greatness obviously begins here." They arrive, look at the low stone walls, the patched roofs, the cramped courtyards, and think, well, at least the hill has a view. Even the view comes with dust. The village is small enough that you can cross it quickly, and large enough that doing so guarantees at least 4 conversations you did not schedule. You step outside, and before you've reached the next doorway, someone has already clocked your expression, your pace, and whether you remembered to wash your face properly. If you are carrying a tool, people notice. If you are not carrying a tool when you probably should be, people really notice. Privacy is a myth. Personal space is a fantasy. A closed door is more of a suggestion. The houses are built from local stone, rough and practical, with packed earth floors and roofs made from beams, branches and mud plastered into cooperation. They do the job, mostly. In winter, the damp creeps in. In summer, the heat settles over everything like a heavy blanket nobody asked for. If the roof leaks, everybody knows. If somebody's wall cracks, the whole lane becomes an emergency committee. There is no such thing as suffering quietly here. Step inside one of these homes, and your eyes need a moment to adjust. The room is dim, cool in patches, warmer near the hearth, and crowded with actual life. Mats rolled against a wall, storage jars, baskets, a hand mill, tools hung carefully because tools cost money, and replacing one is not a casual errand. Children moving underfoot with the uncanny ability to appear exactly where your heel is about to land. You learn to pivot. The smell inside is a whole event. Smoke from cooking fires, oil, wool, bread dough, human sweat, wet clay after washing. Maybe a little goat drifting in from the courtyard because goats simply refuse to honor property lines or social norms. You try opening things up, but windows are small, and ventilation in the ancient world is less a science than a prayer. So, the air develops personality. And now we arrive at the part nobody romanticizes. Everybody in Nazareth is in everybody else's business, because the village is basically one extended group chat with terrible boundaries. Women gather at wells and ovens. Men work in open spaces or doorways. Children run messages, lose track of messages, invent messages, and repeat things they absolutely should not repeat. By noon, half the village knows who argued before breakfast. Not because anyone is evil necessarily, because sound travels, because courtyards share walls, because people live close enough to hear a spoon hit the floor. Because life is communal in the same way a crowded ferry is communal. You are all in this together whether you like it or not, and somebody's elbow is always in your side. So imagine growing up here. Imagine being the boy from that temple incident years ago, the one who had the teachers blinking and the parents panicking. Imagine coming back to a place where none of that buys you an extra inch of elbow room. Nobody in Nazareth is building a platform for your gifted child era. There are chores to do, bread to bake, repairs to finish, and someone's cousin still needs help with a stubborn hinge. The village is not impressed by your potential. The village wants to know whether you can carry water without sloshing half of it onto your feet. That is Nazareth. It has no patience for dramatic mystique. You wake up and there is dirt. You walk outside and there are neighbors. You try to have one private thought, and a child barrels past holding a stick like a sword, while two women nearby discuss whose son has become lazy, whose daughter is almost betrothed, and who bought inferior grain again. No one gets a mysterious aura here. You get a reputation, and reputations in a place like this stick to you like smoke in wool. If you are hard-working, people say so. If you are kind, they remember. If you are awkward at 13, trip over a basket in front of 3 witnesses and knock over a jar, that incident enters village memory with the force of legal testimony. 6 years later, somebody will still mention it while laughing into their lentils. Remember when? Yes, tragically, everyone remembers when. The lanes themselves seem designed to maximize embarrassment. They twist between houses, dip unexpectedly, and narrow so sharply in places that passing somebody requires a kind of sideways apology. Mud appears after rain. Dust appears when there is no rain. Animal droppings appear all the time with a consistency that suggests the village livestock are working in shifts. You stop looking too closely. At dawn, the place stirs early. Roosters start their vocal campaign against human happiness. Donkeys object to existence at full volume. Doors creak open. Someone coughs. Someone sweeps. Someone is already grinding grain with that steady stone-on-stone sound that means breakfast will happen, but not quickly. Nothing in Nazareth is quick except gossip. The central spaces are small and busy. There is no grand plaza, no elegant forum where philosophers stroll in clean robes discussing abstractions. There are work areas, paths, courtyards, ovens, storage spaces, animals, and people trying to finish 12 necessary things before sunset. You cannot drift through life here like a thoughtful cloud. You are always stepping around a jar, a chicken, or a toddler. Usually all 3. And the ovens. You smell them before you see them, warm and smoky, fed with brushwood and dung cakes dried for fuel. Shared ovens mean timing matters. Somebody's flatbreads are puffing. Somebody else is waiting with dough under a cloth. Somebody's child was sent to watch the fire and has wandered off because responsibility is not yet fully installed. So now 3 women are furious. You stand there with the heat against your face, the smoke in your eyes, and the scent of baking bread drifting over ash, sweat, and singed chaff. It is wonderful for 1 second. Then the smoke shifts and slaps you in the nose. Ancient village life. One moment, cozy nourishment. The next, your eyelashes smell burnt. At the well, the village compresses into voices. Water jars knock against stone. Rope creaks. Sandals scuff. News flows faster than water. Who is sick? Who is expecting? Whose roof needs patching? Who visited from Cana? Who sold a lamb? Who has been seen spending too much time talking to somebody they are not related to, which in a village this size is practically a public event. Nobody says they are collecting information. They are just talking. For a young man growing up here, every ordinary movement becomes visible. You go to fetch something, and people know where you went. You return with timber or rope or a repaired tool, and somebody notes the quality. You spend too long alone, and eyebrows begin their own separate conversation. You laugh too loudly with friends, and an older neighbor gives you a look that means rein it in, son. Nazareth has many eyes and very few curtains. Even the children are tiny surveillance agents. They race through lanes with runny noses, dusty feet, and the moral seriousness of people who have just seen something interesting. If you say one foolish thing in public, they will reenact it by sunset, possibly with sound effects. There is no mercy in children. They are cheerful little archivists. And they are everywhere. Babies on hips, toddlers under benches, older children carrying kindling, chasing hens, or arguing over pebbles as though international law depends on the outcome. The village pulses with noise, crying, shouting, laughing, someone calling for someone else, someone pretending not to hear, a dog barking because a dog has once again mistaken movement for personal insult. This is the soundtrack of the hidden years. Not trumpets, not celestial choirs. A goat sneezing, a woman pounding grain, a man cursing softly because a tool edge chipped, someone yelling from one roof to another, clay jars knocking together, a baby with lungs like a war horn. And in that constant human racket, Jesus grows. He grows in a place too small to disappear in and too ordinary to give him any social glow. Nobody is standing around saying, one day this local teenager will alter history. They are saying things like, can he help lift this beam? And tell your family we still have their bowl. And whose goat is this? And why is it eating my drying herbs? Those are the big village questions. Work spills into everything. A house is never just a house. It is sleeping space, storage space, cooking space, repair space, social space, sometimes animal-adjacent space, and occasionally argument space. You duck under hanging items, shift around baskets, and learn that every square foot has a purpose. There is no decorative emptiness. Empty space would be a luxury, and luxury is busy being somewhere else, probably in Sepphoris. But that is for later. For now, Nazareth has the mood of a place getting by. Grain has to be milled, dough has to be baked, wool has to be spun, water has to be carried uphill, which is rude of hills, honestly. Fire has to be maintained, roofs have to be checked, animals have to be fed, chased, tied, untied, and occasionally dragged away from eating something important. Village life is a never-ending list written by a very tired person. You feel it in the stone under your feet, in the worn threshold smoothed by years of sandals, in the soot blackening a corner near the hearth, in the patched cloak someone keeps mending because cloth is not cheap and no one is throwing out a perfectly salvageable garment just because it now has the structural integrity of a legal argument. Everything is used, everything is repaired, everything smells faintly of smoke. And because everything is close, you learn very quickly what kind of man someone is. Not in a grand cinematic way, in the annoying, repetitive way. Does he return borrowed tools? Does he keep his word? Does he help when a wall collapses? Does he show up when a family is grieving? Is he respectful at synagogue, decent to his mother, patient with children, fair in work, honest in trade? That is how a person is known here, slowly, publicly, without fanfare. So for year after year, Jesus is known the same way everybody else is known in a village. Not by slogans, by habits, by whether he can be counted on, by the look on people's faces when his name comes up, by the ordinary witness of ordinary days, which sounds lovely until you realize it means every day is a practical exam and the entire town is grading you. Harsh system, no appeals. There are seasons when the village feels almost snug. Evening light on stone, bread warm from the oven, families gathered in courtyards, a breeze finally moving through after a punishing day. You hear low voices, laughter, somebody singing badly but with commitment. For a moment, the place feels held together by affection as much as necessity. Then a goat gets onto a roof, someone shouts, a child starts crying, a pot tips over, and Nazareth returns to its natural state, which is organized inconvenience. Still, there is belonging here, real belonging, the sort that can irritate you to the edge of sanity and still hold you when grief comes. If someone falls sick, people know. If someone dies, people gather. If a family struggles, that struggle does not remain invisible. Annoying? Absolutely. Comforting? Also, yes. Village life is like that. It is a blanket woven from loyalty, obligation, interference, and crumbs. Lots of crumbs. You can feel what it means then to spend years in a place like this. To mature under constant observation. To become a man while hauling, walking, listening, waiting, and being known by people who remember your childhood face. You do not get to invent yourself fresh every season. Nazareth has receipts. Nazareth remembers your family line, your work habits, your awkward years, your better years, and that one incident with the basket. It remembers everything. So when you picture the lost years, do not picture a handsome fog of mystery. Picture a village lane after rain, tacky underfoot and smelling of wet earth, dung and ash. Picture smoke caught in your clothes. Picture rough walls close enough to touch with both hands if the room is small. Picture old women noticing things. Picture boys wrestling in the dust. Picture someone borrowing a tool and bringing it back late. Again. Picture Jesus in all of that, not floating over it, not glowing through it, living in it, waiting in it, being formed in a town where nobody can hide and nobody gets applause for surviving Tuesday. The hidden years are hidden mostly because they look like everybody's life from the outside. Wake, work, eat, pray, repair, listen, sleep. Repeat until your sandals know the road better than your thoughts do. And Nazareth keeps pressing in. The hill keeps holding its little cluster of houses. The ovens keep smoking. The well keeps gathering voices. Children keep being born. Old people keep dying. Walls get patched. Roofs get resealed. Grain gets ground into flour by hands that ache and keep going anyway. The village does what villages do. It endures by repetition. That is the squeeze of the place. Too small for secrets, too poor for display, too familiar for reinvention, too ordinary to impress anyone. You cannot walk 10 steps without crossing somebody's memory of you. You cannot make one clumsy mistake without donating it to local folklore. You cannot become yourself here without becoming yourself in full view of neighbors, relatives, tradesmen, widows, children, and that one man who always has an opinion despite accomplishing very little. Every village has one, maybe several, and still this is where those years pass, in lanes full of dust and droppings, in homes where firelight catches rough stone, in a community held together by work, gossip, kinship, prayer, and the constant low-grade emergency of keeping people fed. The town does not know what history will later call him. It knows a young man from a family everybody recognizes, from a house everybody can point to, in a village nobody outside the region would bother boasting about. Nazareth is that small. Nazareth is that ordinary. Nazareth is that inescapably close. So by the time you leave the lane and the voices dim a little, you understand the pressure of it. 18 long years in a place where the walls are near, the neighbors are nearer, and your life is never entirely your own. A place where humility is not an inspiring concept, but a daily condition. A place where even greatness, before it is revealed, wears dust on its feet and smoke in its clothes. And the morning isn't over yet. Your stomach growls. Because now the village has shown you its walls, its ovens, its eyes, and its complete inability to mind its own business. Next comes the workbench, the timber, the blisters, and the family trade that puts splinters in your hands and sawdust in your hair. But village life is not just gossip and goats. Someone still has to fix the roof before it falls on Grandma. And that someone is usually standing in front of a workbench before sunrise, rubbing sleep out of his eyes with a wrist already dusted in yesterday's sawdust. The workshop wakes early, earlier than you want. The air is cold at first, and the tools are colder, metal biting your palm like it resents being touched. Wood shavings cling to the floor, the bench, your clothes, your hair, your eyelashes, your general dignity. You sweep, and the place still looks messy. That is the first miracle of a builder's life. No matter how many curls of wood you gather, no matter how many chips you kick into one corner, more appear. Under your sandals, in your sleeves, down the back of your tunic. You go to sleep with sawdust in your hair and wake up with it somehow still there, as if it has signed a lease. Joseph knows the rhythm, and now you do too. Lift this, brace that, hold the beam steady, check the line again, because if it leans now, it will mock you for years. Reach for the adze. No, the other one. The one with the handle worn smooth by hands that have used it so long the wood has learned their shape. The sound starts early. Iron biting wood. Scrape, thud, rasp, knock. A mallet striking a peg with the blunt finality of a judge who has heard enough. Saw teeth grinding forward and back with a noise like two angry insects fighting in a box. It is not musical. It is not inspiring. It is the sound of labor, repetitive and blunt, and very committed to ruining your shoulders. You feel it by midday. Your palms burn first, then your wrists. Then that deep ache between your shoulders that makes you roll your neck and stare at the sky as if the sky personally arranged this. By afternoon, your lower back has entered formal protest. Your tunic sticks to your skin. Dust glues itself to sweat. You smell like hot wood, old sweat, and the inside of a storage shed, and the day is only half done. People say, carpenter's son now, and it sounds almost tidy, almost decorative. Like you spent your youth in a pleasantly sunlit corner, making charming little stools for grateful widows. No. This is not a boutique furniture studio with rustic branding. This is village building, repair work, hauling, fitting, mending. Making the practical things that keep ordinary lives from collapsing in embarrassing ways. A yoke for oxen. A door that closes properly. A roof beam that will not crack after one damp season. A plough handle. A chest. A frame. Maybe parts for a press. Maybe support timbers, maybe whatever some anxious householder drags in while announcing that it is just a small fix, which is ancient for this disaster is now your problem. And now we arrive at the part nobody talks about. Nobody knows exactly how broad the work is. The word people use can stretch. Maybe it means woodworker, maybe builder. Maybe the kind of man who can look at a broken thing, sigh once, and set about making it useful again. In a place like this, you do not get the luxury of specialization. You are not the beam artisan. You are the person who can fix this before my family dies under it. So some days it is timber, some days it is stone, some days it is both, because ancient construction loves teamwork in the same way a mule loves hills. You haul, measure, lift, wedge, trim, and try not to crush your foot under something heavy enough to send you into eternity with a very stupid last expression. You learn weight, not abstract weight, not poetic burden, real weight, the drag of green wood across dirt, the awkward misery of balancing a beam on your shoulder while trying not to slip on gravel, dung, or that mystery patch of slime near the lane, the strain in your forearms when a piece resists fitting, and you refuse to let the wood win because you still have some self-respect. The timber smells good at first. Fresh cut wood has that sharp, clean scent that almost tricks you into believing this is pleasant. Then the sun rises higher, your skin starts stinging, flies find your face, and a customer begins explaining your own work to you. Suddenly the romance fades. Could you make it a little thinner? Of course. Why not also make it float? Heavy enough to last, but light enough for my son. Naturally, the impossible is always included at no extra cost. And perhaps lower the price. There it is. The ancient customer emerges in full glory. You see him clearly, hands clasped behind his back like he is inspecting a royal project instead of a farm yoke. Head tilted, mouth pulled to one side. He runs one finger along the wood and squints, as if this deeply ordinary object has failed to meet the standards of a palace in Antioch. He wants sturdy craftsmanship at bargain rates and, ideally, today. You resist the urge to hand him the tools. A yoke sounds simple until you have to make one. 2 animals will wear it, so it must fit living bodies, not ideas. It cannot rub too harshly, or the beasts will chafe, balk, or turn every field into a public performance of resentment. It has to sit right across necks and shoulders, balanced enough to distribute strain, strong enough to pull, smooth enough not to turn work into torture faster than necessary. You shape the curve by hand. You test the grain. You shave roughness away in fine curls. You keep going until the wood stops fighting. That takes time. It takes eye and touch and patience, 3 things customers prefer to receive without paying for. You plane, scrape, and smooth. Tiny ridges come off beneath the blade. Dust gathers in the cracks of your knuckles. A splinter slides under the side of your thumb, and for one furious second, your entire spiritual life narrows to that one invisible shard. You dig it out with your teeth. Lunch is not elegant. Maybe bread, olives, if things are going well. Dried figs, if somebody was generous or a tree had an unusually good year. Water that is never quite as cool as you want it to be. You sit on a low stool or a stone or whatever is nearby and chew with the mechanical focus of a man whose body has spent the morning filing complaints against management. Then you stand up again, because roofs do not repair themselves. Nazareth is full of things trying to become other things. Wet clay wants to crack, wood wants to warp, rope wants to fray, walls want to shift, doors want to sag until they drag across thresholds with the hopeless groan of old knees. Every household contains at least one object that can be described as still usable if you kick it correctly. That keeps a builder busy. You carry tools from house to house. Adze, saw, hammer, pegs, maybe a line, maybe wedges, maybe a basket with whatever bits the job will require. The roads are not roads so much as agreed upon strips of dirt with stones in them. Children dart past. Dogs inspect you with unsolicited confidence. A chicken runs underfoot with the chaotic energy of a creature designed by committee. You duck into a courtyard and the smell hits immediately. Dung fuel, wet clay, sour milk, smoke, human bodies, old straw, something stewing in a pot, something rotting behind a wall. It is the full village bouquet, earthy and aggressive, and nobody gets to be delicate about it. You climb a ladder that feels one argument away from collapse and step onto a roof of packed mud and branches. Then you start patching. Roof work is filthy. There is no refined way to say that. You kneel in dust. Bits of dried mud crumble into your sandals. Your knees grind against rough surfaces while the sun beats on your neck like it has a personal grudge. Somebody below is calling up suggestions that are useless at best and dangerous at worst. You pack, smooth, reinforce, and test with your hands. Because if you do not do it right, the next rain will come through above Grandma's sleeping mat, and you will hear about it until one of you dies. Probably longer. And sometimes the job is bigger. Sometimes a beam must be replaced, and then the whole household becomes a theatre of stress. Pots moved, mats rolled up, children shooed out. One old relative sitting in the corner refusing to relocate because the house stood before you were born, which is not the encouraging structural assessment anyone hoped for. You and whoever is helping brace the old support, lift the new timber, inch it into place, and pray nobody sneezes at the wrong moment. This is not graceful work. It is grunting, sweating, adjusting, wedging, muttering work. Your shoulder digs under the weight. Your forearms tremble. The beam is never where you want it. It is always a finger's width too high, too low, too angled, too stubborn. Wood is a marvelous material, but it can also be the ancient world's most passive-aggressive opponent. It looks innocent. It is not. By evening, you are wearing the day like an extra skin. Dust on your ankles, resin on your fingers, a nick on your wrist where the tool slipped just enough to insult you. Sweat dried into salt at the edge of your collar. Fine pale powder caught in your beard or along your jaw if you are older now. No longer the temple boy astonishing teachers, but a working man who knows exactly how heavy wet timber feels after a long climb. That matters, because these years are not spent floating 6 inches above the ground, looking serene. You know the sting of a blister tearing open. You know what it is to clench a tool harder, because letting go would mean losing time. You know the tiny groan a man makes when he straightens after bending too long, a sound halfway between prayer and complaint. You know how your hands look after years of this. Thickened skin, small scars, dirt lodged deep in the lines, nails that never stay clean no matter how often you wash. Your hands tell on you. They say labourer, builder, repairman, the dependable son from the village, the one who can carry weight and make things fit and show up when a hinge breaks, or a frame splits, or the rain got in again. Not glamorous, not mysterious, just necessary. That kind of life gives you an education whether you asked for one or not. You learn people while fixing their homes. You see who keeps things in order and who lets every tool vanish into chaos. You see who pays on time and who suddenly develops a long speech about family hardship while standing beside a very healthy goat. You see marriages in the way 2 people speak around a broken threshold. You see grief in houses where a stool sits unused. You see pride in men who apologize to nobody while their wall leans like a drunk uncle at a wedding. You hear everything. When you work in a courtyard, people talk as if you are part furniture. They forget the builder has ears. Arguments drift from the cooking area. Mothers call children by every sibling's name before landing on the correct one. Old men complain about taxes, weather, politicians, back pain, grain prices, and the moral decay of youth, all while spitting with veteran precision into the dirt. It is community by forced proximity. There are jobs outside Nazareth too. Maybe a walk to nearby work, where larger projects need extra hands. Maybe repairs on a farm installation. Maybe part of a crew where village men become day labor wrapped in dust, squinting in bright light and passing materials hand to hand until nobody remembers whose joke started the laughter. You work near stone, near scaffolds, near roads where wealth travels in sandals better than yours. You see contrasts that stick in the mind. A wealthy house wants better fittings, smoother doors, stronger shutters, storerooms that close tight. Somebody somewhere is always building bigger, finer, more impressive. Yet back home, a widow wants one repaired latch and worries about the cost. A farmer needs a yoke that will keep his oxen working through another season because replacing animals is fantasy. One man plans additions. Another just wants the wall to survive winter. Wood enters all of it. So does sweat. There is a smell to hard labor under the sun that no painting has ever captured. Hot skin, dust, sawdust, oiled tool handles, iron warming in your hand, fresh cut wood fibers sharp in the air, old timber releasing stale smells when split open, like dry rot, mouse droppings, and that sweetish damp odor that means something inside the beam has been quietly turning to mush. You find the weak spots by touch, thumb pressing, knuckles knocking, listening to the tone, because solid wood answers differently than rotten wood. One sounds trustworthy. The other sounds like a lie wrapped in bark. A builder learns to hear the difference. You tap and listen. Tap and listen. It is the ancient version of diagnostics, only with more splinters. And the splinters are relentless. One in the finger pad, one under the nail, one in the side of your hand where you did not even know skin could receive wood at that angle. You pull them out with a knife tip, with teeth, with patience, with none of the above. Sometimes you think you got it all, and then the next morning the spot throbs again to let you know the wood has left behind a tiny revenge note. Then there is hauling. People picture crafting, fewer picture transport, which is tragic because transport is where your spine begins writing farewell letters. Timber does not float to the bench on a cloud of holiness. It gets dragged, carried, balanced, rolled or hoisted by men sweating through rough cloth and regretting every life choice after the first steep incline. You shoulder the load. The bark scrapes your neck. The weight drives down through bone into muscle, already tired from yesterday. Your sandals slide a little on dirt and pebbles. Flies circle your face because they have unionized around misery. Somebody in front calls for care around a turn, which would be more useful if the path were wider than a goat's opinion. You keep moving. That is much of these years. Not brilliance on display, not crowds gasping, moving, lifting, shaping, repairing, returning. Day after day until skill settles into the body so deeply you reach for tools without looking and judge a beam with one glance. Work has taught your hands what your mouth does not need to say. And there is Joseph in it too, for at least part of these years. You can feel the shared labor between father and son, the short instructions, the silent coordination that comes only after many ordinary days. One man braces while the other cuts. One checks the fit while the other reaches for pegs. A nod instead of a speech. A correction with 2 words. Respect built not from grand speeches, but from thousands of repetitions done side by side. Then one day the weight shifts. Maybe Joseph is slower now. Maybe he coughs more. Maybe a younger back carries more of the load. Maybe customers start looking first to the sun when they ask what can be salvaged and what must be replaced. Families change quietly, then all at once. Work notices before words do. So you become the one expected to know. The one people greet with practical urgency. The one who gets fetched when something cracks. The one who must estimate cost, time, effort, materials, and how much nonsense from the customer can be endured before lunch. Adulthood arrives less like a trumpet and more like someone handing you a broken door and assuming you will sort it out. You probably do, because that is what these hidden years are made of. Competence no one writes songs about. Faithfulness in sweat. The holiness of not dropping your end of the beam. The patient work of making ordinary life livable for other people. There is no spotlight in the workshop, just light through a doorway thick with dust motes, a bench scarred by use, a jar of pegs, a tool head needing attention, a pile of offcuts that might still be useful because you do not waste good wood. Somewhere in the corner, a spider conducting its own long-term building project with frankly upsetting confidence. The day stretches. You work through it. You shave a board smoother with long strokes, feeling the surface change under your palm from rough and snagging to clean and even. You trim a tenon until it finally seats with a satisfying firmness that almost redeems the whole afternoon. You tighten a joint. You reset a handle. You square a frame. Little acts of order pushed back against a world constantly trying to crack, split, sag, leak, rot, and fall apart. That is builder's work in one sentence. Push back the falling apart, and when the evening comes, you do not look impressive. You look used. Your shoulders sag. Your hands are sore. There is dust in the fold of your neck, and a smear across your forearm you missed while washing. Your stomach is loud. Your legs feel heavier on the walk home. Even the breeze, when it finally rises, feels less like poetry and more like mercy on overheated skin. Back in the house, the tools are set down carefully, because tools matter. Iron costs, handles split, edges dull. Everything valuable must be maintained or replaced at pain to the household purse. So you wipe, store, sharpen, check. Even tired, you do it. Tomorrow those tools must work again, and tomorrow is coming with the unstoppable confidence of a tax collector. The smell of supper reaches you. Bread, lentils, oil, maybe herbs, maybe not. Maybe a little fish if the week has gone unusually well. You wash your hands and they still do not come fully clean. Dust lingers in the creases. Resin clings at the thumb. The skin is rough enough now that soapless water has to negotiate. Your body lowers onto the mat with gratitude bordering on worship. But morning will come, and with it another repair, another beam, another customer with impossible expectations and the bargaining instincts of a street merchant possessed by demons. Another day of shaping wood and bearing weight. Another day in a workshop where ordinary labor keeps ordinary people sheltered, fed, and one rainstorm away from disaster. This is the carpenter's son, not framed in gold leaf, framed in doorways, courtyards, rooflines, and wood dust. A man who knows what splinters feel like. A man who has carried loads that bite into the shoulder and leave a red groove by evening. A man who has learned patience because materials resist, customers haggle, and nothing useful gets built in a hurry. So the years pass with iron on wood, sweat in the eyes, calluses thickening where skin once blistered. And somewhere inside all that hammering and hauling, all that fitting and lifting, all that hidden work done far from applause, a life is being formed that can bear far more weight than timber. But the day is not finished yet. Your stomach growls, your back aches, and tomorrow looks suspiciously like today. The sun is higher now. Your back already aches. Not from prophecy this time, not from hauling beams either, just from living, which in Nazareth is apparently a full contact sport. You wake up, you stand up, and your body immediately sends a list of complaints to management. And now we arrive at the part nobody writes songs about: breakfast, chores, and the exact same dust as yesterday. You open your eyes in the dim grey before sunrise, and for one brief, idiotic moment, you do not know where you are. Then the smell reminds you. Warm bodies, old wool, packed earth, stale smoke, and yesterday's bread somewhere nearby becoming steadily less appealing. Children are still sleeping, or pretending to. Someone has stolen most of the blanket. A foot is in your ribs. Another person is breathing with the deep, dramatic snort of a man who worked too hard yesterday and intends to do it again today against his own better judgment. You shift carefully because waking everyone before dawn is how family peace dies. The room is cold enough to make you resent air itself. You pull on the same rough tunic, or one of the same 3 rough tunics, all of them patched so many times they have become more patch than original garment. The cloth scratches. The seam under one arm has opinions. Your belt is a strip of leather that has seen things and does not respect you. Breakfast is not an event. It is an arrangement. A heel of barley bread, maybe olives if the household has them, maybe a little oil, maybe dried figs if someone planned well, or a relative visited, or a miracle occurred in the pantry overnight. Mostly, though, it is bread with the texture of roofing material and a cup of watered wine or water that tastes faintly of clay. You do not bite this bread so much as negotiate with it. Your jaw works like a millstone. Crumbs go everywhere. One child eats too fast and coughs. Another sulks because his piece looks smaller. And somebody is already asking where the good knife went, as if knives simply grow legs and wander off to a better family. Morning starts before you're ready, which is rude but consistent. A pot has to be checked. Coals have to be coaxed back to life. Grain must be ground, and if you've never started your day by shoving a heavy stone in circles while half awake, congratulations on your luxurious upbringing. The sound of grinding fills the house, a dry, scraping rhythm that says, with no warmth at all, yes, we are doing this again. Your shoulders know the motion before your mind does. Stone on stone, grain cracking, flour dust settling onto your hands, your sleeves, your face. By the time the sun lifts over the ridge, you already look lightly seasoned. And water, always water. Nobody in Nazareth turns a handle and waits for a cheerful stream. You want water, you go get it. That means jars, weight, walking, and a line of other people who also had the radical idea of needing liquid to continue living. The path is familiar enough to walk half asleep. Dirt under sandals, loose stones trying to end your ankle, thorn bushes reaching out like petty little bureaucrats demanding a toll. The morning air is cool now, but not for long, and everybody knows it. So, everyone moves quickly, with that purposeful village speed that says, I have too much to do, and not enough daylight to do it. At the water source, the day has already begun socially, whether you consented or not. Women talk, children squabble. Somebody's toddler is sticky for reasons no one can identify. A jar tips and everyone flinches because pottery is expensive, and hearing one crack is like hearing coins scream. News travels here faster than crows. You are never merely fetching water. You are hearing who is ill, who is pregnant, whose goat wandered into whose garden, which cousin is visiting, which family is behind on something, and who tried to fix a roof themselves and made the problem spiritually worse. If your sandal strap breaks on the path, 12 people will know by midday. By evening, one of them will have improved the story. The full jar digs into your shoulder and hip on the way home. Water sloshes. Your arm goes numb. Your hand cramps around the handle. By the time you reach the house, you have developed a private, heartfelt hatred of gravity, and the day is still just beginning. You carry, sweep, mend, wash, scrape, tie, untie, lift, and carry again. You shake dirt from mats that should really apologize for the amount of dirt they contain. You patch tears in clothing by lamplight when necessary, and in daylight when possible, squinting at thread that never wants to go where it's needed. Everything frays. Sleeves fray, sandals fray, rope frays, tempers fray, baskets split, handles crack, hems unravel, and jars chip at the rim. Life here is one long campaign against things falling apart, and the things are winning by a narrow margin. So you mend. You sit with a needle, coarse thread, and a garment that smells like sweat, smoke, and outside. Your fingers are calloused enough to help, not enough to prevent occasional stabbing. You turn a torn edge inward, pull the thread through, tighten, knot, trim. Not because this is glamorous, because cloth is labor, and labor costs too much to throw away over one stupid rip. Children need watching too. There are younger brothers underfoot, younger sisters carrying more than adults think they can, and all of them somehow managing to be loud while also asking innocent questions at the exact wrong moment. One is crying because he fell. Another is crying because the first one got attention for falling. A third has found something dead and wants to show everybody. Village childhood is not curated. It is dust, scraped knees, runny noses, animal sounds, and a permanent film of mystery on their hands. You tell one child not to throw stones, another not to chase chickens, and a third not to eat something he found near the wall because that is not food. That is debris with ambition. Around midday, heat arrives like a personal insult. The shade shrinks. The stones begin radiating yesterday's sunlight back into your shins. The air thickens with dust, dung smoke, sweat, and cooking smells from neighboring houses, a neighborhood perfume best described as aggressively communal. Flies appear because of course they do. They land on everything with the confidence of relatives who never learned boundaries. Your face, the bread, the water jar, the rim of a bowl, that damp cloth near the doorway. You wave them away. They treat this as a mild suggestion. Midday food is no great improvement over morning food, but it is still welcome. Bread again. Lentils, if the pot has been kind. Onion, herbs, olives, maybe goat cheese, if circumstances are unusually merciful. The stew is hot enough to scorch your mouth, or lukewarm enough to disappoint your soul. Either way, you eat it with gratitude and a very practical understanding that this is fuel, not cuisine. Nobody asks whether you'd prefer something lighter. This is not a cafe. This is survival with table manners. You dip bread into a common bowl, tear, chew, swallow, and try not to think too hard about whose fingers were just where yours are now. Shared meals build community and test immunity at the same time. Then back to it. Because life in Nazareth does not pause for dramatic mood. The floor still needs sweeping. A tool needs finding. Someone has to go see whether the neighbor borrowed that thing and forgot to return it, which he absolutely did. Days stack like bricks. One looks suspiciously like the next. Morning bread, water jars, work, heat, sweat, flies. A quick meal, more work, evening, sleep. Repeat until your soul starts keeping time by muscle memory. And years pass this way, not with fanfare, not with music swelling in the background while destiny adjusts its cloak. Just day after day after day, each one small enough to miss and heavy enough to shape a life. You go to synagogue when the day calls for it, and the rhythm changes, but only somewhat. You wash up as best you can, which in a village without modern plumbing means improved, more than pristine. Dust leaves in streaks. Hands are cleaner than before. Your hair remains committed to chaos. Then you walk with everyone else. The room is modest. Stone, wood, bodies, breath, woven garments, old scrolls, familiar voices. No stained glass, no polished pews, no gentle instrumental music drifting in from nowhere. Just people from your town gathering to pray, listen, recite, and remember who they are under heaven. You sit or stand among neighbors you already know too well. The man who snores during long readings. The child who cannot stay still for 6 consecutive heartbeats. The older woman whose face can express 7 kinds of disapproval without moving a muscle. The person behind you who has apparently marinated in garlic. And still, this matters. Voices rise together in prayer. Ancient words fill a room full of ordinary bodies. Men with cracked heels, women with sore backs, children trying their best, elders leaning into memory. Outside, goats remain idiots. Inside, for a little while, everything gathers into order. You listen, not as someone floating 6 inches above the floor in a beam of holy light. You listen as a man from a working family with dust in the hems of his clothes. The words about mercy, law, justice, deliverance, patience, covenant, all of it lands in a life made mostly of chores. That is where it has to land. There is nowhere else. Then Sabbath comes, and even rest has rules. Work slows. Fires must be thought through ahead of time. Meals require planning. Distances matter. Rhythms tighten. The whole village moves differently. Not idle, not chaotic, but deliberate. And this, too, is work in its own way. Stopping is not easy when survival usually means motion. You feel it in your hands first. They want to reach, sort, fix, lift, carry. But the day says no. Sit down. Eat. Pray. Remember, the world does not stay standing because you kept busy. Families gather close on these days. The bread is still simple. The walls are still close. Children are still children, which means somebody spills something and another person complains and someone else tries to smooth it over before it becomes an intergenerational event. But there is blessing over the meal. There is song. There is that particular household hush that comes when labor eases its grip for one day. You notice things when work loosens. The scrape in a father's breathing that was not there years ago. The tiredness around a mother's eyes. The way younger siblings are growing into their faces, stretching into duties, losing baby softness and gaining calluses of their own. Time does not announce itself. It just keeps taking measurements. Some evenings are quieter than others. The lamp burns low and gives off that thick smell of oil and smoke. Light trembles on the wall. Someone patches a sandal. Someone else rubs sore feet. The younger ones finally collapse into sleep in a tangle of limbs after one last argument about absolutely nothing. You hear the village settling outside, a donkey complaining to the entire region, a cough from the next house, pots being moved, a gate creaking, footsteps on packed dirt. Somewhere, a couple is having the same disagreement they had yesterday, only with fresh enthusiasm. Then there are the sick days, the stomach-turning days, the fever days, the days when someone lies under a blanket too hot and too cold at once, while the house continues around them because it has to. Water still needs carrying, even when somebody is ill. Bread still needs making. Goats, tragically, remain committed to being goats. You learn how fragile a household is. One person weak and everybody shifts. One pair of hands missing and the whole day buckles. Duties move around. Older children do more. Meals get thinner. Sleep gets shorter. Worry sits in the room like another body, silent and impossible to ignore. And then there are the very ordinary mercies. A cool morning after a brutal week of heat. Fresh bread that came out better than expected. A jar that did not crack. A tunic repair that holds. A younger sibling who finally learns to carry something without dropping it. Tiny victories, village edition. No one carves them into stone. Still, they matter. A life is built out of these little survivals. So is patience. So is tenderness. So is the ability to keep showing up when nothing about showing up feels dramatic enough to be remembered. Some afternoons, the light turns mean. It flattens everything. The white glare off stone makes you squint until your head aches. Sweat trickles down your back in a line so irritating you briefly contemplate starting a personal feud with the sun. Dust clings to damp skin. It gathers at your ankles, sticks between your toes, settles in the folds of your clothes, and works its way onto food no matter how carefully it was covered. You eat the land, breathe the land, wear the land home every night on your feet. By evening, fatigue has a texture. Your arms feel heavy and hollow at the same time. Your knees complain when you crouch. The back of your neck is tight. Your hands smell of rope, flour, wood, oil, and skin. Not perfume. Evidence. The meal at day's end is simple, but in your hunger it feels almost extravagant. A bowl passed around. Bread torn and shared. Maybe lentils again, because lentils are apparently eternal. Maybe herbs. Maybe a little fish if somebody came from a larger town and the household is feeling briefly sophisticated. You eat with people who know your face in every mood. They know your annoyed face, your tired face, your quiet face, your laughing face, your face when a child says something absurd and accidentally profound. They know when you are carrying more inside than you say. This is family, a blessing and an ambush. Nobody gets to be mysterious here. Not for 18 years. Not in a village this small, in rooms this close, with chores this repetitive. If you are patient, people see it. If you are irritable, people see that too. If you keep your word, if you carry your share, if you show up again and again without complaint, or with only the normal amount of complaint, all of that settles into reputation. And reputation in Nazareth sticks like burrs. One good deed is remembered. One awkward moment is remembered longer. One day of unusual kindness toward a tired parent or a difficult sibling may pass quietly, but it leaves a mark all the same. Character forms in public around here, whether you requested an audience or not. That is the strange holiness of these lost years. Not lightning, not choirs, not enemies falling backward in shock, just choosing over and over to do the needed thing in front of the needed people at the needed time. Carry the water, fix the strap, listen at synagogue, help the child, honor the day of rest, eat with gratitude, sleep, wake, begin again. It does not look impressive from the outside. From the outside, it looks like another village man living another village life under another hard sun. It looks like rough bread and sore feet and patched clothes drying on a line. It looks like a person learning obedience in a house where somebody is always hungry, tired, or sticky. But that is exactly where these years happen. No trumpet announces faithfulness in a small room. No crowd applauds when you return from carrying water without grumbling, or mostly without grumbling, which counts. No one gasps when you split your meal fairly, mend what can be mended, or sit in silence when the day has worn you down to the bone and tomorrow is already waiting. Still, the days are doing something. Every ordinary morning lays another thin layer down. Every Sabbath shapes memory. Every chore completed when nobody is watching trains a soul to stop needing to be watched. Every meal shared, every sibling helped, every tired prayer spoken before sleep presses one more mark into the grain. Years gather quietly. You do not always feel yourself changing inside them. That is the sneaky part. A season passes, then another. A younger brother's voice drops. A sister takes on tasks she once fumbled. A parent moves slower. Your own hands grow stronger, then rougher, then simply older. The village remains the village. The dust remains offensively committed. But you are being formed there all the same. Night comes. Then another morning. You lie down on bedding that does not deserve the title. Straw shifts underneath you with all the tenderness of bundled twigs. The room smells of feet, wool, old smoke, and the fading remains of supper. Someone is asleep instantly. Someone else whispers. A baby in the next courtyard objects to the concept of darkness. Tomorrow is already lined up outside the door. The bread will need making, water will need carrying, clothes will still tear, children will still need helping, prayers will still be said, work will still ask for your back, your hands, your time, your patience, and you will rise into it again. Not because the day is exciting, not because anybody is taking notes, not because every hour feels drenched in significance. You rise because this is your life, and these hidden years are not empty at all. They are full of bread, water, dust, waiting, family, repetition, and the slow, stubborn beauty of a person learning to be faithful where nobody is impressed. And that goes on, morning after morning, season after season, through heat and chill, through repairs and meals, through prayers remembered and chores resented, and rest received with grateful, tired hands. The lost years do not vanish. They accumulate. They accumulate in the body first, in calluses, in posture, in the easy way you lift a jar or shoulder a burden or kneel to tie a strap for a younger child. In the practiced patience that does not arrive all at once, but by repetition, like a path worn into hard ground by many feet. Then they accumulate somewhere deeper, in the quiet habit of showing up, in the refusal to despise small work, in a life where heaven is honored in ordinary rooms with low ceilings and too many people in them, in the long unrecorded stretch where almost nothing changes and everything matters. So the lamp burns low, the village settles, dust cools on the threshold, and inside one crowded home, in one forgettable little town, another ordinary day finally ends, only to make room for another. still, a life is not only made of tools and chores. People keep getting married, dying, arguing, and asking you to help move something heavy, usually on the same week. You finish one long day in the workshop with sawdust glued to your forearms by sweat, and before your shoulders can forgive you, somebody's cousin is getting married. That means the whole village begins vibrating with preparation. Women haul baskets. Men pretend they are not stressed while being visibly stressed. Children run everywhere underfoot like small hostile chickens. Nothing happens quietly in Nazareth. A wedding starts before the wedding starts. You hear it in whispers at the well, in neighbors counting jars, in aunties discussing linen with the gravity of military planners. Somebody is baking. Somebody is borrowing oil. Somebody is already offended about seating, though there are no seats, only rugs, benches, and the ancient human skill of taking insult where none was offered. You are expected to show up. Not casually either. You are not some mysterious loner drifting through town with excellent hair and no obligations. You are a son in a known family, a brother in a crowded household, a man people have watched grow from temple-bright child into broad-shouldered laborer. Your presence matters. Your absence would become gossip before sunset and theology by morning. So you wash as well as a village man can wash. This is not spa-quality bathing. This is a bowl, a jar, some cold water, and determination. You scrape the day off in layers. Dust, sweat, fine wood shavings, and whatever that sticky substance was from fixing someone's broken yoke. You put on cleaner clothes, which still smell faintly of smoke, olive oil, and life in close quarters. Then you go. The bride's house is already full enough to qualify as a hazard. Lamps throw warm light across stone walls blackened by years of cooking smoke. You smell bread, roasted grain, wine, wool cloaks that have seen too much weather, and bodies packed close together with no concept of personal space. Someone laughs hard enough to snort. A toddler has sticky hands and is using them aggressively. This will go on for hours, possibly days. You stand in a doorway for half a heartbeat and somebody spots you. Of course they do. In a village this size, entering a room is less like arriving and more like being uploaded into public consciousness. An uncle waves you over with the imperious confidence of a man who has already had enough wine to become a management problem. Now you are carrying something, a stool, a jar, a tray, a child who fell asleep on a grain sack and must be relocated. You have not been at the wedding 7 minutes, and already your role has shifted from guest to useful adult male. This is family life. You are loved, and you are furniture with hands. The music starts up again. A reed pipe shrills. Hand drums answer. Clapping picks up in crooked rhythm because half the men are enthusiastic and the other half are rhythmically cursed. People sing. Not delicately. This is not a polished choir in matching robes. This is full-throated village singing with joy, volume, and at least one elderly relative charging bravely into notes not previously known to exist. And yet it works. The bride appears, and the whole room leans toward her. Jewelry catches the lamplight. Fabric rustles. Women ululate with such force that a nervous child begins crying, and a dog outside answers like it has been personally invited. Men grin. Mothers dab their eyes. Fathers attempt dignity and fail immediately. You watch faces as much as ceremony. That is how you learn people. Not from speeches. From the way a groom keeps glancing at his bride as if he still cannot believe this is happening. From the way a mother smiles while already calculating flour usage for tomorrow. from the way brothers act tough until the moment turns tender and suddenly discover urgent interest in the floor. A village wedding is a public announcement. These two are joined. These families are tied together. Everybody sees it. Everybody remembers who brought what, who sang, who drank too much, who accidentally stepped on the hem, who cried first, who looked unimpressed, but later asked for leftovers. Memory in a place like this is long, sticky, and extremely well fed. You eat when food comes. Flatbread warm from the oven, olives wrinkled and salty, lentils, herbs, maybe fish if somebody has connections, maybe meat if the family can afford celebration on that scale. Wine appears in cups passed hand to hand. It is not fancy. It does the job. One swallow in, a man is already telling the same story he told last feast, only louder and with himself somehow more heroic. Nobody stops him. Across the room, somebody asks about your mother, then about your brothers, then whether the latest roof repair held through the last rain, then whether you can come next week to help with a gate post because your hands are good and your rates are fair, and also you are too decent to say no outright. Every social gathering in Nazareth eventually turns into scheduling. It is the ancient version of getting trapped at a party by someone who says, "While I've got you," you smile anyway. Because affection is woven through all this obligation. Real affection. Exasperating affection. Nose in your business affection. Affection that arrives with extra bread and unwanted opinions. These are your people. They know your family history, your strengths, your awkward adolescence, and probably the time you tripped carrying water at 14. They also know who comes when a beam falls, who stays when someone is sick, who can be trusted with grief. That kind of knowledge takes years. And now we arrive at the part nobody romanticizes. Funerals. A wedding fills a house with heat, laughter, spilled wine, and too many elbows. A funeral fills it with sobbing, torn voices, dust on clothes, and the thick, sour smell of too many mourners shut inside one room. Joy has noise. Grief has noise too. Different noise. Lower at first, then sudden, sharp, public, impossible to ignore. Death does not happen privately here. Somebody dies, and the village knows before the body is even wrapped. Feet pound the dirt. Neighbors appear. Relatives come from nearby settlements if they can. Professional mourners may join the household with practiced wailing that sounds theatrical until you are standing in it and your chest starts tightening anyway. You go because of course you go. You help because of course you help. Carrying, lifting, fetching, making space, speaking softly to the stunned, steadying the old, guiding the children away when they stare too long. There is always a practical side to sorrow. Even heartbreak needs jars filled, mats arranged, and bodies borne carefully. You can smell the spices before you enter. Myrrh, aloes, oil, wool, dust, tears, and the stale breath of a crowded room where nobody has slept. Someone has been cooking for mourners, and lentils sit untouched, because grief can ruin the appetite while somehow making the whole house smell like onions. A lamp smokes in the corner. Faces are swollen. Eyes are red. The floor is gritty under your sandals. People cry out the name of the dead, again and again. It lands in the air like a hand pounding on a locked door. You hear the stories begin almost immediately. He was kind. She worked hard. He always shared. She laughed loudly. He fixed my wall that year the rains came hard. In a small village, a death tears through networks you cannot even see until they start snapping one by one. You stand there and feel how brief a body is. One season you are hauling grain or arguing over a boundary stone. Next season, your neighbors are speaking of you in the past tense, and your cloak is folded by someone else. The lost years are not just long stretches of ordinary life. They are long enough for funerals to keep happening, long enough for the boy you knew to become a husband, then a father, then a memory. And grief has chores attached. That sounds cold, but it is merciful. Somebody must grind grain. Somebody must bring water. Somebody must sit with the bereaved, so silence does not swallow them whole. You learn this too, that love often looks like carrying what sorrow has made too heavy to lift. Sometimes the dead are old, sometimes they are not. That is when the room feels wrong in a way words cannot repair. A mother bent over with both hands to her mouth, a father standing rigid, because if he bends, he may not stand again. Children confused by adult weeping, peering from behind skirts. There are no speeches polished enough for that. There is only presence, food no one asked for, and the blunt kindness of showing up. Years pass like this. Wedding songs in 1 month, funeral cries in the next, a baby named, an old man buried, new roofs raised, boundary disputes flaring over half an arm's length of dirt, as if the fate of nations depends on it. You discover that village life is 90% relationships, and the other 10% pretending you are not exhausted by relationships. The synagogue gathers all of it under one roof. On Sabbath, the village changes its pace. Work pauses. Tools rest. The hammering stops, and your hands feel strange without tasks in them. You walk with family through streets that seem almost civilized, where nobody is hauling dung fuel or shouting over a donkey that refuses to cooperate. Inside, it smells of wool, oil, old wood, and people trying very hard to be reverent while still being people. Children fidget. Old men cough with the solemn regularity of temple percussion. Someone's sandal squeaks every third step and becomes impossible not to notice. Scrolls are handled carefully. Voices rise for prayer. A reading begins, and the room stills, though not perfectly, because perfection is not on offer in Nazareth. You know these rhythms now in your bones. Stand, listen, sit, answer, sing. Hear familiar words fall into familiar air, while dust motes float in a stripe of sun, and somebody's baby makes a sound like a disgruntled goat. Sacredness here is not polished marble and golden silence. It is packed bodies in a modest room, trying to hold the Holy One in human voices. And people are watching, not in a sinister way, in a village way. They know how you listen, whether you come on time, whether your family arrives together or slightly irritated with one another, whether you make room for elders, whether you speak gently, whether you carry yourself like a man with steadiness or a man with weather in his head. Long before anyone follows you, they know you. They know whether you are dependable, whether you help when called, whether grief makes you patient or sharp, whether joy makes you generous or loud and foolish. A reputation in Nazareth is built from 1,000 unremarkable moments. One Sabbath greeting, one shared meal, one borrowed tool returned in good condition, one tool returned late and muddy, and suddenly your character is a regional discussion. Then come the festivals, and the whole world expands for a moment. The roads fill, sandals scuff dust into the air, families pack food, blankets, extra water, and enough opinions to sustain a military campaign. Children ask how much farther every 20 minutes. Grandmothers move at a pace that suggests eternal life will arrive before the group reaches Jerusalem. Still you go. Pilgrimage is joy wrapped in logistics. You travel in company because roads hold dangers, thieves, accidents, illness, and the crushing irritation of organizing human beings who all believed someone else packed the figs. By midday, the smell around the group is a complicated blend of sun-warmed wool, leather straps, stale bread, sweat, and animal breath from whatever beast has been loaded beyond reason. At night, fires prick the dark. People talk, pray, trade stories, argue about the best route as if any of them invented roads. You lie awake hearing low voices, coughing, a child whimpering in sleep, someone snoring like a clogged shofar, and the restless shifting of pilgrims who will be back on their feet before dawn. Then, Jerusalem appears. Even if you have seen it before, it still hits you. More people than Nazareth can produce in 10 generations. More noise than your village makes in a year. Traders shouting, animals bleating, coins clinking, smoke rising, priests moving with purpose, beggars calling out. The city feels like every human emotion got dressed at once and shoved into narrow streets. You move through it with family pressed close. Lose track of one sibling, and suddenly your pulse jumps. Somebody is always lagging, staring, asking questions, needing food, or developing a sandal problem of catastrophic proportions. Feast days are holy, yes, but they are also what happens when thousands of people try to worship, eat, sleep, and locate relatives simultaneously. It is spiritual and logistical and smells strongly of sheep. The temple courts surge with motion, prayers, songs, sacrifices, lines, waiting, more waiting. Smoke gets into your clothes and stays there. Blood darkens stone. Water splashes. Voices echo. You feel tiny and crowded and somehow lifted all at once, standing among your people under the weight of ancient promises, while a man behind you keeps clearing his throat directly into your left ear. That is pilgrimage. Holy wonder with an elbow in your ribs. You watch your family in the city, your mother alert, practical, managing bodies and bundles with frightening competence. Your brothers restless in waves, energetic, hungry, half attentive, entirely alive. Relatives looping in and out of your path. Neighbors from Galilee spotted unexpectedly in the crowd and greeted like survivors of the same bizarre group trip. These journeys bind people, shared songs on the road, shared meals eaten with tired hands, shared memory of crowded courts, bright mornings, long returns home. A child grows up on these trips and learns the story of the people not only from readings, but from blisters, smoke, dust, and the sight of everyone moving in one direction together. Then you go back to Nazareth, back to familiar hills, back to houses crouched on the slope, back to workbenches, ovens, patched cloaks, and all the smaller obligations waiting like unpaid invoices. Festivals are bright. Home is repetitive. Both are part of the same life. And family expectations never loosen. A culture like this does not ask whether you are in the mood to be responsible. It assigns responsibility the way weather assigns mud. Your mother needs help. You help. Your younger siblings need guidance. You guide. A relative's roof sags. You climb. Someone in the extended family is quarreling over inheritance, dowry, livestock, or who insulted whose grandmother 18 months ago. You will hear all about it. Probably at dinner. You become the dependable one little by little. Not through a grand declaration, through repetition. You are the man who arrives when promised. The man who can lift the beam, fix the latch, carry the beer, escort the family, read in the gathering, listen before speaking. In a world with no online profile and no personal brand strategy, this is how identity forms. People know your name because your life has weight in their hands. They also know your limits. They know when you are tired, when grief sits behind your eyes, when you have gone quiet for reasons you do not explain. Public life in Nazareth leaves very little room for private sorrow, but it does not erase interior life. It only means you carry it while handing someone a jar, answering an elder, or walking beside family to yet another house where something important is happening. There must have been evenings when the noise finally dropped away. The house settles. Bowls are stacked. The last child stops asking for water. Outside, dogs bark in the distance, and somewhere a donkey expresses outrage at the concept of darkness. You sit against a wall or stand beneath the open sky and feel the day still clinging to you. Laughter from the wedding, crying from the funeral, chatter from the synagogue courtyard, questions from brothers, needs from neighbors, a whole village leaning on your name. And still morning comes again. Another invitation, another condolence visit, another Sabbath, another road walked beside family, another dispute cooled before it flares, another meal where stories are repeated and responsibilities quietly passed from older shoulders to younger ones. This is how a man becomes known before he is known beyond his town. Not by spectacle, by being there, by standing in doorways when joy bursts out singing, by entering houses where grief has turned the air thick and unbreathable, by carrying things, by listening to old men, by honoring his mother, by walking with brothers, by praying in crowded rooms, by returning what he borrows, by showing up so reliably that people stop remarking on it and simply expect it. That expectation is its own kind of burden, also its own kind of honor. Because one day, when people speak your name with surprise, with wonder, with anger, with hope, they will not be speaking of a stranger who dropped from the clouds fully formed. They will be speaking of the man they have seen for years in ordinary light. At weddings too long and funerals too raw, on pilgrim roads thick with dust, in synagogue shadows, in family rooms where bread was broken and opinions were never in short supply. The known man comes first, the famous one much later. And by now, Nazareth knows the shape of your footsteps, the sound of your greeting, the steadiness of your hands, the way you stand in a crowded room without needing to fill it. They know whose son you are, whose brother, which house is yours, what sort of man arrives when called. That knowledge settles over these years like dust on a threshold, quietly, daily, thoroughly, and it clings. Then lift your eyes beyond the village path, because the world outside Nazareth is already grinding its gears. You feel it before you understand it, not with trumpets or proclamations, with pressure, with the way a farmer counts grain twice and still looks sick, with the way men lower their voices when a road carries strangers in armor, with the way every coin seems to leave your hand faster than it arrived, which is a trick money has been performing on humanity since the dawn of time. Nazareth is small, yes, but small places do not float in bubbles. They get leaned on. You walk out past the familiar stone houses and terraces, and the hills open enough to remind you there is a larger world nearby, larger and louder and much better dressed. The path is dusty under your sandals. Dry grass scratches your ankles. Somewhere a lark is trying its best. Somewhere else a donkey is making a noise like an argument with no hope of resolution. And over all of it sits Rome. Not always in sight, always in effect. You do not need to see an emperor to feel an empire. You feel it in taxes, in tolls, in soldiers using roads your village helped pay for but does not control, in the polite terror of people pretending not to stare when official business passes by, in the maddening knowledge that a man far away can affect your dinner without ever learning your name. That really adds a special seasoning to the bread. The roads matter first. They always do. A road is never just a road. It is trade, soldiers, messages, officials, caravans, gossip, debt, ambition, and trouble with good sandals. Dust rises off it in pale clouds and settles on your skin, in your hair, in your mouth, between your teeth. By noon, you can taste the whole region. Chalk, dirt, animal sweat, and whatever blew in from somebody else's problems. Men travel these roads with tax demands and building orders. Men travel them with crates, fabrics, fish packed in salt, wine in skins, and pottery wrapped in straw that still somehow arrives broken because the ancient world has never met a jar it could not chip. Others travel with spears and short tempers. You hear iron before you see it sometimes, that little clink and scrape of metal shifting as men walk, and the whole roadside becomes suddenly very interested in olives, clouds, or absolutely anything else. No one wants to make eye contact with authority unless forced. And nearby, not so far that you can pretend it does not exist, sits Sepphoris. That city glitters in the imagination before it glitters in your eyes. Built up on the hill, rebuilt, expanded, sharpened into something ambitious. It looks like the kind of place people in villages talk about with equal parts resentment and fascination. Stone cut finer than what you sleep beside. Public buildings, markets, rich homes, decorative things. Entire surfaces devoted to being attractive instead of merely preventing goats from entering. Very flashy, deeply suspicious. From Nazareth, Sepphoris is close enough that its existence presses on village life like a thumb on a bruise. You can work there, hear about it, sell into it, lose labor to it, watch younger men dream about wages there and older men mutter that cities chew people up. Both groups are correct. You make the walk with others sometimes. Morning comes thin and cool, and a string of labourers moves along the path with tools over shoulders and bread tucked into cloth. Somebody coughs, somebody spits. Somebody has already started complaining, which is impressive considering the day has barely opened its eyes. Your own shoulders remember yesterday's load and are not enthusiastic about today's. Ahead, the city rises. Closer now, Sepphoris stops being an idea and becomes noise. Hammering, cartwheels, vendors shouting, animals braying in several emotional registers, stone being dragged, men calling for lime, timber, water, more hands, fewer mistakes. It is the sound of ambition with dust in its lungs. You smell mortar first, then fresh-cut stone, hot wool, dung, olive oil, sweat and refuse, left too long in an alley where the sun has been personally attacking it since dawn. Urban glamour, in other words. Wealth never removes smells, it just layers them. Construction is everywhere. Herod Antipas is building, improving, polishing, making statements in stone because rulers adore a statement in stone. Walls go up, public spaces widen, houses for the important get courtyards and columns, and all the usual signs that some people possess entirely too much money and no fear of decorative flooring. Labour crews swarm over the place like ants with lower morale. You join them, or at least stand close enough to know the rhythm. Lift, carry, brace, cut, fit, sweat, repeat. By midday, the sun presses down so hard the top of your head feels cooked. Dust cakes the inside of your nose. Your tunic sticks to your back. Lime bites your skin if it gets damp, which it does, because you are a person, and not an ornamental vase. Men wipe their faces with forearms already streaked white and grey. Somebody drops a stone. Somebody swears. Somebody above yells for care, and everybody below immediately develops a vivid appreciation for gravity. Cities are miracles of planning and disasters of smell. They need endless labour, endless supplies, endless food, endless hauling. Villages like yours help feed them and build them, even while remaining the sort of places city people dismiss as backward. You can feel the insult in the arrangement. A man from Nazareth planes beams, lifts stone, repairs fittings, and trudges home with sore knees, while some silkier gentleman in town speaks as though buildings simply emerged because money had a vision. Of course they did, by magic. And while Sepphoris grows polished edges and public grandeur, the villages keep counting their grain. That is the contrast you cannot miss. In town, mosaics begin to appear under rich feet. In the countryside, a widow wonders whether oil will stretch another week. In town, banquets. In the village, lentils again, and everybody pretending not to be disappointed. In town, imported goods. In Nazareth, patched cloaks, repaired tools, and bowls that have survived so many cracks they deserve honorary citizenship. You see wealth and want standing practically shoulder to shoulder. One man rides, another sweats under the thing the rider bought. Markets make the difference even louder. You pass stalls heaped with goods that did not grow on your hillside. Dyed cloth in colours so rich they look almost rude. Fine pottery with painted edges. Metalwork polished bright. Spices that hit your nose all at once and make your empty stomach furious. Cinnamon, pepper, cumin, coriander, all drifting over fish, onions, wool, hot bread, damp leather, and the sharp slap of urine from a nearby wall where apparently civilization has not quite reached. The city is full of wanting. Wanting to buy, wanting to sell, wanting to rise, wanting to impress, wanting not to be overlooked. A poor man walks through all that abundance and feels every missing thing in his house at once. A rich man walks through it and wonders whether his neighbour's lampstand is nicer. Humanity remains consistent, and all of this unfolds under Roman shadow. Sometimes the shadow has sandals and helmets and passes right by you. Soldiers on the road, mounted or marching, moving with the kind of practiced indifference that says they are used to taking up space in lands not their own. Leather creaks, metal glints, dust clings to greaves. The horses smell like hot hide and manure. The men smell like wool, oil, and old campfire smoke. Conversation changes when they appear. It doesn't stop. It thins. People suddenly become very busy with baskets, ropes, produce, children, and any object within arm's reach. Your eyes lower just enough to seem respectful, but not so much that you stumble, because getting run over by a military horse is an embarrassing way to die. A child stares too long. His mother jerks him back by the shoulder with the speed of a woman who has survived this world by having no patience for nonsense. The soldiers pass. Your jaw unclenches 3 full breaths later. Nobody in Nazareth needs a lecture on occupation. Occupation is not a concept. It is the reason a tax collector can ruin supper. It is the reason road traffic includes armed men who do not ask permission. It is the reason local rulers perform loyalty upward while squeezing downward. It is the reason every public disturbance feels like a spark near dry straw. Taxes arrive with the tenderness of a kicked door. Land tax, produce tax, toll on goods, payments to rulers, payments to empire, payments wrapped in paperwork nobody in a village enjoys and everybody fears. Grain leaves, oil leaves, coins leave. Chickens probably look nervous on principle. Families do calculations by lamplight, with the tight faces of people trying to divide too little into too many portions. You watch a father pour out coins onto a low table. He nudges them into little piles with a finger rough from work. One pile for this, one pile for that, one pile that is too small and knows it. His wife says nothing for a while. The room smells of smoke, lentils, stale bread, and worry. Outside, somebody's goat has gotten into something again and is being shouted at with righteous exhaustion. The coins do not multiply. Funny how that never happens. Some years the strain tightens. Harvests vary. Work comes and goes. A repair job pays in grain instead of silver. A family member gets sick. A roof needs patching. A tool breaks, which is always rude because tools are expensive and breakage has no respect for timing. Then official demands still arrive, perfectly punctual, as if the whole countryside is a machine designed to produce revenue and not a cluster of tired households trying not to collapse. You learn what pressure does to people. It makes some bitter, some cautious, some hard, some generous in exactly the ways that hurt them. A neighbor shares flour he cannot spare. Another starts guarding every crumb like a dragon in a cave, except the treasure is barley and the cave smells like onions. Men quarrel over boundaries. Brothers argue over inheritance. Debts sit in a room like an extra person nobody invited and nobody can get rid of. All of this while prayers continue. That matters. You feel it. Sabbath still comes. The synagogue still gathers people whose lives have not become easier just because heaven remains heaven. Hands cracked from labor-hold scrolls carefully. Voices worn by bargaining, grief and dust still recite blessings. You walk from roads full of soldiers into a room full of neighbors and hear ancient words in a world that feels increasingly loud, expensive and armed. The contrast is enough to make your chest ache. Outside, power struts in polished boots and masonry. Inside, old promises are spoken over benches and walls that smell faintly of oil, wool, and human proximity. The village does not stop believing because empire exists. It believes while empire exists, which is far harder and much less photogenic. A widow still prays while taxes bite. A farmer still lifts his eyes before eating bread. He worked half a year to grow, and another man partly claimed. Children still learn the words. Mothers still hush babies through readings. Old men still nod at lines they have carried in memory longer than some ruler's entire career. The Holy One is not absent because Rome has a road system, but the road system is very annoying. And now we arrive at the part nobody talks about enough. Resentment is in the air like dust, not constant shouting, not everyone plotting revolution between breakfast and lunch, more like a rawness under the skin, stories of old freedom, hopes for deliverance, anger at corruption, anger at compromise, anger at soldiers, anger at neighbors who seem too comfortable with all this, anger at hot weather, failed crops, expensive fish, and men in authority with soft hands. A region can get tired enough to spark. You hear names sometimes, rumors, men who talked too boldly, men who gathered others, men who promised something, men who ended badly, because Rome has a deeply predictable response to trouble, and it usually involves wood, nails, and public warnings no one can miss. The roads carry those stories too. They arrive dusty and half-whispered, with the shape of fear around them. Every parent hears them and thinks of sons. Every son hears them and thinks of manhood. The air is not calm. it is managed. Sepphoris itself knows unrest and rebuilding, ambition and force. A city can shine and still remember smoke. You walk its streets and sense that polished surfaces do not erase what happened before. New stones go up over old fears. Markets reopen. Labor returns. Officials smile the smiles of men who assume order has been restored because they paid for enough masonry. Stone is confident like that. People, less so. Back in Nazareth, evening folds over the village after a day in the city's orbit. You come home with dust on your calves and shoulders throbbing. The little house feels even smaller after broad streets and big buildings, but also saner, lower, plainer, honest. Supper waits in some modest form. Bread, oil, maybe lentils, maybe olives, maybe fish if fortune briefly remembered your address. You sit, you eat, you listen. Someone mentions wages. Someone mentions prices in Sepphoris. Someone else says a road patrol stopped travellers near such and such turn. A cousin heard this. A neighbour saw that. Your younger siblings absorb all of it while pretending not to. The lamp smokes. The room smells of cooked grain, feet, wool, and a day's worth of humanity trying to soften into night. The world is getting louder, even in here. And you would know it in your body. The hidden years are not hidden from history. They unfold right beside it. You lift beams while cities rise. You hear market haggling sharpen under economic strain. You watch piety persist under rulers who can build theatres faster than they can build justice. You see luxury near hunger, order near threat, devout people living under men they did not choose. That does something to your seeing. A man who spends years watching day labourers wait for wages notices faces in a crowd. A man who walks village paths under imperial roads understands burden. A man who sees rich storehouses and poor kitchens in the same region does not need abstract speeches about inequality. He has smelled both rooms. One smells like roasting meat, perfumed oil, and polished cedar. The other smells like damp grain, thin soup, and worry. You cannot unsmell that. The same goes for power. You watch it from below long enough, and it reveals its habits. Processions, displays, building projects, titles, men very impressed with seating arrangements, tax structures complicated enough to make ordinary people feel stupid, public piety from some, public greed from others, a whole world where those with soft hands issue demands to those with blistered ones, all very grand, all very fragile. Still, daily life goes on because daily life always goes on. Timber still needs shaping, roofs still leak, children still grow out of tunics at offensively fast rates. Chickens remain unstable little opportunists. Donkeys continue operating under the belief that cooperation is for weaker species. Bread still burns if ignored. Sickness still comes. Weddings still happen. Funerals too. Empire does not pause chores. It just makes them cost more. So you live in the overlap. Nazareth under its own routines. Sepphoris nearby with its glitter and appetite. Rome overhead like weather with paperwork. Herodian ambition in stone. Village faith in stubborn repetition. Public tension just under ordinary conversation. The whole land carrying on with prayers, labour and private grief while history stomps around in hobnailed sandals. By now you can feel the scale of it. Not one dramatic speech, not one giant explosion, a long pressure. 18 years of waking up in a world where power is elsewhere, money flows uphill, soldiers use the roads, and poor families keep making meals anyway. 18 years of seeing how people bend without breaking, break without meaning to, share when they should hoard, hoard when they wish they could trust, and keep calling on God in villages the mighty could not find on a map without help. That kind of life trains your eyes. It teaches you what hunger sounds like when someone tries to hide it with a joke. What fear looks like when it stands aside for a patrol and keeps its face polite. What debt does to a household. What rich men build. What poor men carry. What mothers save. What rulers display. What labor costs and what arrogance never notices. And all of it is happening while the world assumes nothing much is happening in Nazareth. That is almost funny. History is rumbling just beyond your front door and sometimes straight through it. But the village still looks small enough to ignore. Just another hillside cluster of stone, smoke, laundry, children, tools, and women returning from the well with neck muscles stronger than most politicians. Just another place where supper gets cooked, roofs get patched, and men come home tired. Yet these are the years filling up with sight. Sight of roads, sight of wages, sight of wealth, sight of strain, sight of power from underneath, where it looks biggest and least impressive at the same time. By sunset, the hills go gold, then bronze, then dim. Sepphoris in the distance catches the last light like something expensive showing off. Nazareth settles into shadow with its ovens, its muttering, its animals arranging themselves offensively close to wherever people wanted peace. The day's heat leaks out of the stones slowly, voices lower. A baby cries. Somebody laughs once, sharp and tired. The empire is still there. The taxes are still there. The city is still there. The road is still there, carrying soldiers, merchants, laborers, rumors, and tomorrow. And in the small village below the larger powers, lamps are lit one by one, humble and stubborn against the dark, while the hills hold their breath for what comes next. "You're taking the South Road?" somebody asks, and even the question sounds offended. Of course it does. This is Nazareth. You cannot sneeze near the storage jars without 3 neighbors discussing the moisture level of your soul by sunset. So, the idea that a man might leave town for reasons not immediately explained has everyone leaning casually in doorways with the least casual faces imaginable. The morning looks like every other morning. That is almost the strangest part. Light climbs over the limestone. A rooster screams like it's being personally persecuted by dawn. Somewhere, a donkey begins complaining in that raw, rusty voice donkeys have, as if every sunrise is an administrative failure. Bread bakes, smoke lifts. A child cries because somebody took a fig, and this is apparently the worst betrayal in recorded history. Inside the house, the routine still knows its lines. A bowl, a cloth, water poured from a jar with that hollow glug-glug sound. Hands that have done this for years doing it again. The floor is still hard under your feet. The walls still hold yesterday's heat badly and the morning chill too well. Nothing in the room announces that one life is about to split cleanly into before and after. But you can feel the tension anyway. Not loud tension, nothing theatrical, no thunder rolling over the roof, no glowing messenger in the doorway making everyone drop their bread. More like the feeling just before a storm breaks, when the air goes tight and your skin notices something your eyes cannot yet prove. 30 is coming. In your world, that means something. You are no longer the boy from the temple surprising old men with sharp answers. You are no longer the teenager carrying boards too large for his frame and pretending his shoulders don't hurt. You are a grown man now, with practiced hands, and a face people know, a voice people recognize, a place at the table already shaped by years of showing up. That ordinary life has weight. It sits in the body, in the wrists hardened by tools, in the scar near the thumb where the blade slipped that one summer afternoon and everybody pretended not to panic, in the shoulders that know what a beam feels like before it bites down fully, in the back that can predict rain better than half the village because old strain has become its own weather report. You don't drift through 18 years like a ghost. You live them. You wear them. They settle into your muscles and your habits. You know which hinge sticks in cold weather, which neighbor overpays when embarrassed, which child always arrives with a runny nose and sticky fingers and a question nobody asked for, which family is grieving, which one is feuding, which old man needs his stool repaired for the third time because he leans back like death is optional. And now all of that familiar life is somehow nearing its edge. The workshop still smells the same. Dry wood, iron filings, sweat soaked into old handles, and dust that gets into your nose, your beard, your eyelids, and probably your ancestry. A half-finished piece sits where it sat yesterday. Coils of shaving curl on the floor like pale little scraps of onion skin. Light falls through the doorway and catches every floating particle, because sawdust is apparently committed to being involved in every major spiritual transition. You put your hand on the bench. Maybe you pause there a moment, maybe not long, just enough to feel the grooves worn by years of labor, cuts from blades, burn marks, oil stains, all the small wounds of use. Nothing in the room is impressive. No polished grandeur. No sacred museum glow. Just tools, wood, wear, and the long honesty of work that fed people. And now we arrive at the part nobody talks about. Leaving home sounds noble until you remember home contains actual people. Real people. People with tired eyes and routines and expectations. People who are not symbolic. They are not a backdrop. They are family. A mother getting older. Brothers with their own tempers and opinions. Sisters moving through chores with practical speed. Relatives who assume tomorrow will look enough like yesterday to plan around it. Then one morning, it doesn't. You see it in the little things. A longer look across the room. A question asked twice. A hand resting briefly on a shoulder because words are clumsy and people know it. Maybe breakfast is quieter. Maybe somebody overcompensates and talks too much about olives or whether the roof patch will hold through winter, because discussing destiny before sunrise feels exhausting. The food is still plain. Bread, coarse and dense enough to qualify as masonry. Olive paste, dried fish if the household is fortunate, and if not, then not. Water that tastes faintly of clay jar and yesterday's dust. You chew, you swallow. Your stomach accepts the arrangement with the weary resignation of an employee who knows complaints will change nothing. Outside, Nazareth keeps being Nazareth. Women move toward the well-balancing jars and gossip with equal skill. Men step into lanes already lined with packed dirt, dung pellets, and the kind of mystery dampness you decide not to investigate for emotional reasons. A goat noses into something it absolutely should not be eating. Two boys run past barefoot, shrieking. One old woman notices everything. She always has. Frankly, if Rome ever needed intelligence gathered in Lower Galilee, they could have saved time and just asked her. Familiarity wraps around the place like smoke. The same stones, the same doors, the same courtyard corners where people argue, the same Sabbath paths worn by years of sandals. You know where the ground dips after rain, which wall throws the best afternoon shade, which roofline catches the earliest light. A whole life has been built from repeated small recognitions. That is what makes leaving heavy. Not because Nazareth is glamorous. It is not. Nobody is composing love songs about the village drainage situation. The place smells like baking bread, dung fuel, damp wool, old olives, human effort, and whatever the goats have recently destroyed. Privacy remains a fairy tale. Comfort is an occasional rumor. But it is home, and home gets under the skin even when it tracks mud across the floor. The Sabbath before departure would have felt almost painfully normal. You walk the same path, hear the same greetings, sit among the same people who have known you since you were small enough to trip over your own hem. The room smells of bodies, oil, wool cloaks aired badly, and the dry, papery scent of scrolls handled with care. Someone coughs. Someone whispers too loudly. A child fidgets with the doomed confidence of a creature who has never had to sit still for an hour among adults. Prayers rise that have risen 1,000 times before. Well-worn words, ancient words, words learned young and carried into adulthood until they fit the mouth like familiar bread. Not flashy, not novel, steady. You have spoken them in joy, in fatigue, in grief, in the flat middle stretch of days when nothing dramatic happens and the lentils still need sorting. That matters more than it looks. A life can be prepared by repetition, by standing, listening, answering, working, returning, showing up again. Not every holy thing arrives with symbols. Some of it comes disguised as obedience, so ordinary nobody bothers writing it down. Some of it looks like years of doing what is in front of you, while the larger shape remains hidden like a road just beyond the hill. By now, your hands know their work without discussion. They can lift, plane, fit, bind, carry. They can help mend a frame, steady a load, pour water, break bread, comfort the grieving, greet the familiar. Hands trained by years of usefulness are different from untouched hands. They are marked, thickened, capable. The kind of hands people trust around a damaged thing. And now those same hands are almost ready for another kind of work. You can feel the village pressing close in these last days. Not suspiciously, not yet, just densely. Every lane carries memory. Every face has history attached. You pass the courtyard where children once played at chasing Romans and prophets, usually getting both wrong. You pass houses where weddings spilled into the night and funerals poured grief into the street. You pass thresholds where bread was shared, arguments had, illnesses endured, debts worried over, babies washed, old people buried. All of it held you. All of it formed you while looking unremarkable. Then word begins drifting north about the wilderness preacher by the Jordan. Not drifting neatly, of course. News in villages never arrives dressed and organized. It comes in pieces, with dust on it. A traveler says there is a wild man preaching near the river. Another swears crowds are going out to him. Somebody adds that he dresses like a man who lost a fight with a blanket and won't let it go. Somebody else says he eats insects, which is one way to keep dinner guests to a minimum. Still, the reports keep coming. Repent, wash, prepare. The kingdom of heaven is near. People hear it in the market, on the road, at festival, from cousins, from traders, from men whose donkeys know all the routes and none of the boundaries. The words move through the land like sparks in dry grass. And something in you answers, not with panic, not with the frantic energy of a man finally pursuing a delayed hobby, more with recognition, like hearing a voice through a wall and knowing exactly who is on the other side. The waiting years, the hidden years, the years of labor and prayer and unnoticed faithfulness, all of them begin to lean in one direction, south. So one morning the road is no longer theoretical. You step onto it with sandals that know dust well. The hill country opens and folds before you in pale browns and muted greens. Rocks jut from the ground with the stubbornness of old arguments. Thorn bushes crouch low and mean. The air carries dry earth, crushed herbs underfoot, sun-warmed stone, and the occasional rank blast from some passing animal that has made deeply unfortunate dietary choices. It is not a glamorous departure. No banner, no choir, no dramatic tracking shot with orchestral strings. Just a man leaving his village on foot. One more traveller on roads already worn by merchants, pilgrims, labourers, soldiers, beggars, and people who made the mistake of trusting somebody's shortcut. Dust finds your ankles immediately, because dust in this land is clingy, intimate, and frankly out of line. Behind you, Nazareth shrinks. The houses flatten into the hillside. Roofs become shapes. The lanes disappear. Somewhere back there, ovens are heating. Tools are hanging on pegs. Someone is calling children in from the yard. Someone is still talking about your leaving with the kind of confidence usually reserved for eyewitnesses and people who are wrong. Ahead of you, the land widens. The road south is full of movement. Pilgrims, traders, men with bundles tied badly, and women with baskets tied better. A few animals making negotiations with gravity. Bits of conversation drift past. Taxes, relatives, harvests, Herod, prices, rumours, always rumours. Human beings can apparently turn any road into a comment section. But beneath all that noise runs something steadier, a sense that the long quiet was not empty, that the years in Nazareth were not a delay or a holding pattern or some celestial clerical error. They were life, real life, forming life. The hidden years were full of substance even when they looked plain from the outside. Bread baked, wood shaped, prayers repeated, losses endured, family loved, bodies tired. Mornings begun, evenings finished. That was not nothing. That was readiness. By the time you near the Jordan, the air changes. You can feel it before you properly see the river country. The dryness gives way to a different scent, reeds and damp soil and water moving through heat. Crowds gather in uneven knots. More people than a small village could comfortably tolerate without somebody starting an argument about space, lineage, or whose sandal is in whose cloak. And at the center of all that movement is John. Wild-looking, severe, sun-browned, standing out there with wilderness in his beard and urgency in his voice. The kind of man who makes polished people deeply uncomfortable and ordinary people strangely alert. He is not smoothing anything over, not softening edges. He speaks like an axe is already raised, and everybody can hear the wood fibers tensing. The people go down into the water. They come with dust on their hems and regret in their chests. Farmers, labourers, mothers, old men, young hotheads, women with tired eyes, men with too much confidence, people carrying private shame like a sack of wet grain. One by one, they wade in. Mud squeezes between toes. River water soaks cloth and skin. The bank smells like wet earth, bodies, trampled plants, and the particular sourness of a crowd standing in heat too long. And now the waiting breaks, not with chaos, with arrival. After years of hammering, hauling, praying, and waiting, the road has finally pulled him somewhere else. The village is behind him. The river is in front of him. The silence of Nazareth has done its work. All those ordinary mornings stand there too, though no one else can see them. The workshop, the meals, the funerals, the Sabbath prayers, the long obedience of a hidden life. They have all walked with him to the water, and the Jordan keeps moving, slow and brown under the open sky, as if it has been expecting this all along. So after all of that, what were the storytellers trying to tell us? Because 18 years is a long time to leave sitting in silence. That is not a missing page. That is not somebody forgetting the interesting part. You do not glide from a sharp, astonishing boy in the temple to a man at the Jordan by accident. The quiet is doing work. And first, it tells you something almost offensively ordinary. Nazareth mattered. Not because it was impressive. It absolutely was not. It was small, cramped, nosy, and probably smelled like warm stone, cook fire smoke, and goat opinions. It was the kind of place where every bad haircut became community knowledge before lunch. But that is exactly the point. The one at the center of the story did not grow up in a palace, a library, or a place where servants handled the gross parts of life. He grew up where everybody else got stuck growing up. That means the holy life was not kept behind polished doors. It happened in a village where sandals wore thin, babies cried through the night, and your neighbor absolutely noticed if you borrowed a tool and brought it back late. The hidden years tell you that small places are not spiritually second class. Heaven was not allergic to ordinary addresses. Then there is the work. All that wood, all that hauling, all that scraping, lifting, measuring, cutting, patching, and trying not to smash your thumb with a hammer-shaped rock because ancient job sites were basically safety violations held together by optimism. Those years matter because they give weight to the hands in the later scenes. These are not decorative hands. These are working hands. Hands that knew splinters. Hands that knew what it was to finish the day with grit in the teeth and shoulders that felt like somebody had replaced the muscles with rope. So when he spoke to laborers, farmers, fishermen, widows, and people one missed payment away from disaster, there was nothing airy about it. He had lived inside the same tired body rhythm they had. Wake up, work, sweat, eat little, sleep hard, repeat until you die, unless a tax collector gets creative first. That changes the feel of everything. It means ordinary labor is not a detour from real life. It is real life. The hidden years say that making, mending, carrying, and enduring are not empty activities while you wait for something important to begin. They are already full of meaning. A bench repaired in obscurity is not glamorous. Neither is a yoke finished properly when nobody applauds. But dignity lives there anyway. And then you get the repetition. Bread, water, dust, again. Bread, water, dust, again. The same path to the well, the same sweep of the floor, the same rough meal, the same prayers, the same people, the same chores with the same stubborn stains that come back as if they pay rent. 18 years of that can sound dull until you realize most human life is built exactly that way. That is why the silence is comforting. It tells you a life does not become meaningful only when the dramatic music starts. Most days do not arrive with thunder. They arrive with laundry, sore feet, and a jar that needs refilling. The hidden years place enormous weight on the plain old faithfulness of showing up, not shining, not performing, just showing up. There is something deeply steadying about that, especially for anybody whose life has lately felt like one long line of errands with occasional lentils. Family matters too. Before crowds shouted his name, he was somebody's son, somebody's older brother, somebody who had to help, carry, attend, repair, show up, and stay when staying was required. That means love was practiced before it was preached, in kitchens, at funerals, at weddings that went on forever, because nobody in the ancient world had heard of ending on time, in crowded houses where grief and joy both had to share the same air. That part is not flashy either. Family duty rarely is. It is errands and patience and making room and swallowing irritation when everyone is hungry and the room smells like sweat, wet wool and cumin. But the hidden years say those obligations are not beneath holiness. They are one of its workshops. Character gets built there, in the tight spaces where there is no privacy and everybody is one comment away from a quarrel. Then there is the pressure from outside. Rome overhead, Sepphoris nearby, money flowing somewhere else, power dressed in polished stone, while villagers patched roofs and counted coins with the desperation of people doing math against hunger. Those years were not peaceful in the soft romantic sense. The roads carried soldiers, the taxes arrived, the rich built things ordinary people would never own. Everyone knew what it felt like to live under somebody else's boot, even when the boot was not literally on your neck that morning. So the hidden years were not sheltered. They were ordinary, yes, but ordinary inside a hard world. That matters, because the man who later spoke about burdens, debt, power, mercy, hypocrisy, fear, hunger, and the crushing weight laid on common people was not guessing. He had grown up hearing the same market complaints, seeing the same unequal streets, watching the same little humiliations stack up. He knew what oppression felt like at ground level, where it shows up as rent, taxes, lost sleep, and one more year of making do. And then the silence itself. This is the part people get itchy about. They want the montage, the secret speeches, the teenage miracles, something dramatic to fill the gap. But the gap is the message. The quiet years were not blank. They were forming years. Readiness was growing in places nobody could see, which, frankly, is how most real growth happens. Not under banners, not with an audience. In private, slowly, with dust in your nose. You do not get 30-year-old steadiness without 20 years of ordinary obedience. You do not walk into public suffering with that kind of strength unless something deep has been built in hidden places. The years in Nazareth were not dead space between better scenes. They were foundation. And foundation is almost always boring to watch. It is holes, stones, sweat, and a man explaining for the 9th time why this beam cannot go there. But if the foundation holds, everything else can stand. So when the storytellers leave most of those years quiet, they are not teasing you. They are honoring something. They are telling you that obscurity is not emptiness, that a person can be fully alive, fully faithful, fully seen by God, while looking, from the outside, almost completely unremarkable. That is good news for people whose names are not known beyond 3 streets and a workplace, which is to say, for nearly everyone, and that may be the warmest part of it all. The one at the center of the story did not merely visit human life at its dramatic peaks. He shared the slow texture of it, the waiting, the chores, the obligations, the tired muscles, the village gossip, the political strain, the family expectations, the long stretch where nothing seems to change, and yet you are being shaped all the same, not above it, inside it. So the lost years were never truly lost. They were hidden, yes. Quiet, yes. But full. Full of work, patience, growth, limits, endurance, and the sort of daily faithfulness that almost never gets written down. That is why the silence can rest easy. It is not covering nothing. It is protecting the dignity of an ordinary life. And when he finally leaves Nazareth, the years behind him do not vanish. They travel with him in his hands, his speech, his patience, his strength, and the deep understanding of how hard it is to be human. That was the message settling underneath all of it. Maybe that is where this lands closest to you. Not in the dramatic parts of your life, but in the ordinary ones, the repeated tasks, the unseen patience, the days that feel like they are mostly made of maintenance, obligation, small disappointments, and getting up again anyway. Because your hidden years count too. The work nobody applauds, the kindness nobody notices, the responsibilities that keep returning with the persistence of dust on a village floor. None of that is wasted just because it is quiet. None of it is empty just because it does not look impressive from the outside. So maybe the silence over Nazareth is not an absence. Maybe it is mercy. A reminder that God is not only present in the public, dramatic, history-making moments, but also in the years where you are simply becoming steady enough to carry what comes next. No year wasted, no chore beneath notice, no obscurity empty. The hidden life counted too. It always did. The road out of Nazareth is nothing special. That feels important. No shining stones, no trumpet blast, no dramatic crowd parting like a stage play finally getting serious. Just a narrow path, packed dirt under sandals, little stones that work their way into your souls, and morning lights spreading slowly over the hills while the village behind you yawns itself awake. You can still hear it if you pause. A rooster, loud and self-important, someone coughing in a doorway, a clay jar set down too hard, a goat complaining as if the entire sunrise has happened specifically to inconvenience it. Life in the village is already starting up again with all the grace of a household trying to find its other sandal. Behind him, ovens are warming. Not elegantly. They never do. Smoke drifts up with that sharp, dry smell of dung fuel and ash, and the first bread of the day is already being slapped into shape by hands that have done this so often they could probably manage it half asleep. Somewhere, a woman is sweeping yesterday's dust out her doorway, which is ambitious because today's dust is already on its way. The tools are hanging where they always hung. Wood shavings still caught in corners. A bench worn smooth by years of elbows and effort. Iron bits, pegs, cords, mallets, all the ordinary things of a life built one repair at a time. The workshop does not glow with nostalgia. It just stands there, smelling faintly of wood, sweat, oil, and the old stubborn labor of human hands. And that is the strange tenderness of it. Most of the life has happened there. Not on the water, not on the hills with crowds, not in the sharp public moments people remember and paint and argue about. There, in rooms that got too hot by noon, in mornings that began before you felt ready, in jobs that had to be finished because people needed roofs, beams, Doors, yokes, tables, repairs. A life hidden in plain sight. You think about all those years folded into one another like stacked cloaks. Waking, washing, working, eating bread tough enough to qualify as a building material, walking the same paths, hearing the same neighbors, watching children grow into adults and adults stoop into old age, seeing the same stones in the same walls until they became part of the furniture of your mind. 18 years is a long time to be ordinary, long enough to know which door always sticks in damp weather, long enough to recognize footsteps before the person appears, long enough to carry water jars with the easy misery of practiced shoulders, long enough to bury people, celebrate people, forgive people, avoid people, and keep living among them anyway, because village life is essentially one long group project nobody can leave. And still he walked there, not above it, not untouched by it, through it. He knew what rough wool feels like on skin that is already sweaty. He knew the ache in your hands after repetitive work. He knew what it is to sit in a cramped house when too many people are talking and one child is crying and another has tracked in mud and supper smells faintly scorched because somebody got distracted. Heaven, astonishingly, put up with family noise for years. That remains one of the loveliest details. Not because it is flashy, because it is not. Because the Holy One did not merely pass through human life for an afternoon visit, keeping his robes lifted above the mud. He lived inside the full arrangement, dust in the hem, splinters in the hand, smoke in the lungs, neighbors in the doorway, chores waiting with the dead-eyed persistence of chores everywhere. Now he leaves, and Nazareth keeps going. That too feels right. No one freezes mid-step. No fig tree rustles with prophetic jazz hands. A man still heads for the well. Someone still needs dough. A child still trips over a threshold and starts wailing with impressive conviction. The village does what villages do. It absorbs departures. It remembers, poorly and unevenly. It survives. By midday, the lane will look almost the same. Sun on stone. Flies doing what flies do, which is too much. A dog asleep in the wrong place. The smell of cooking lentils, old smoke, trampled herbs, and animal business baking gently in the heat. A woman calling for somebody who is absolutely pretending not to hear her. Ordinary life, grinding on with steady little teeth. And yet, something has changed. Not in the walls, in the memory of them. Because those hidden years were not empty years. They were filled to the brim, filled with obedience so plain you could miss it, filled with patience that never got applause, filled with strength spent on things nobody writes songs about, like lifting, measuring, carrying, mending, listening, showing up, going back, doing it again. So much of a human life looks useless from the outside. You wash the bowl. It gets dirty again. You mend the cloak. It tears somewhere else. You sweep the floor. Dust returns like it pays rent. You make the meal. Everybody eats it and is somehow hungry tomorrow. Whole decades can feel like that. One modest task after another. No fireworks, no audience, no summary. But none of it was lost. The years in Nazareth stayed in the hands that later touched lepers and children and grieving faces. They stayed in the shoulders that knew labor before they carried anything heavier. They stayed in the voice that would speak to farmers, builders, women baking bread, men hauling nets, servants waiting at doors, because none of that language was borrowed from a distance. It had been lived. You can almost see the last look back, not dramatic, just human. A glance at familiar stone, a roofline against morning light, a doorway dark with shadow, maybe the workshop, maybe the lane, maybe the hill itself, holding that little village with all its cramped routines and old smells and difficult tenderness. The place was small. The years were not. Then the road takes him, southward, step after step, sandals lifting pale dust that settles behind him almost at once. Roads are like that. They keep no visible record. One traveller passes, then another, then a cart, then a herd, then wind, and by evening the surface has forgotten all of them. Dust is rude that way. Still, some journeys remain, not because the road remembers, but because people do. Nazareth would go on being Nazareth. Children would still race through alleys. Bread would still rise badly or well depending on the day. Men would still haggle, grumble, repair things, fail to repair things, and blame the material. Women would still carry households on tired backs. Old people would still sit near the shade and watch everything with that unnerving accuracy old people have always possessed. The village would remain small. The hidden life would remain vast. That is the comfort settling over the hills now. Not the comfort of spectacle, the comfort of nearness, of knowing that heaven once accepted the long middle stretch of human life, the uneventful years, the years of work and waiting, the years when nobody is clapping and history seems to be happening somewhere else to richer, louder, cleaner people. But holiness was there too, in the meal, in the timber, in the walk to synagogue, in the carrying of water, in the staying, in the leaving when it was time to leave. Morning light moves farther up the stone walls now. The ovens burn hotter. The workshop stays behind. The path bends where hills begin to hide one place from another. Dust lifts, then settles. Birdsong flickers in the scrub. Far off, another day opens over Galilee with all the usual business of hunger, labour, taxes, prayer, sore feet, family voices, and the stubborn continuation of ordinary life. And he had lived inside that world for a very long time, not around it, inside it. So the village grows smaller behind him. The road keeps reaching ahead. The years nobody wrote down settle softly back into the dust, not erased, only quiet. And Nazareth endures, long after the footsteps have faded from its lanes. Quieter now, but still there, and somewhere beyond the hill the story continues.